it's producers or artists just wanting to sign the deal for whatever reason. I know you like this person or you think this is a good opportunity, but don't be desperate. I think it's their feeling of desperation that oftentimes people feel.
Peace, what's going down? It's the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast, episode 21. We just got our stomach pumped because we overconsumed alcohol at the frat party. Being 21, man, it's a beautiful age. What's going down? We have some special guests. Well, one special guest today. Dame is special, but he's not a guest. We got Karl Fowlkes, who is an entertainment lawyer that you may be familiar with. He's an outspoken advocate for producers and musicians in general within the legal side of the music business. What's going down, sir?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. It's dope to have him here because, I think, Payne, you and I know a lot, but we don't know everything, and we're aware of that. So when we have people, we know a lot of people that have some deep expertise in different areas. So we're glad to have you, Karl. And that's actually is kind of an example of what we do in the Music Entrepreneur Club, because we're constantly bringing guests to fill in the gaps or to just bring a fresh opinion, because there's not one right answer to every question in the music industry. There's often many. So, our perspective can always be refreshed or added to. So, Karl, thank you, man. Appreciate you being here.
For sure.
Well, how I'm doing is my phone is broken and the screen is cracked and I can't use it. And so I can type only on the lower quadrant. And so I tell Dame this, and his genius reply is, well, you should get a new phone. I'm waiting on the part from the service provider, and it's taking them forever. So otherwise, trust me, I would have a new phone or a working phone.
All of Payne's texts are coming through like a teenager. It's hard to decipher them. I'm like, yo, what's going on here?
Well, hold on. You live with a teenager, right? So you should be familiar with this.
I do, but she's not as bad as your texts that are coming through. But anyway, let's jump into this. A couple episodes ago, we were talking about, because Audio Mac made a tweet. They asked, what are the most pressing issues in the industry? And I think, Karl, you responded to this, and your response was predatory contracts. There was probably more wording around that. So you can refresh our memory and say exactly what you said about predatory contracts. And I want to jump into that and explore exactly what you mean by that.
Right. And it's funny. I really didn't give too much more context when I said predatory contracts, just because, I feel like that just across the board, you'll get a guy with one placement, this is on the producer side, and all of a sudden there's like 5 or 6 producers trying to sign him. And before they accept loops or want to do any other business with them, they're like, no, you got to sign this deal. And it's like an exclusive producer agreement for like 3 years with an option. And it's just like, what? Like, and it's usually oftentimes it's maybe a European producer or someone who doesn't have any experience in the music industry. And there's a lot of fear mongering, I'll call it, where just, if you don't sign this deal, man, you missed out on this opportunity. If you don't sign this deal, man, we're not going to work with you. And, and not just on the producer side, it goes literally across the whole industry. So that part of it just really bothers me, especially as an attorney, because, then I'm the guy who's going to have to clean up the mess a year and a half down the line when they're trying to get an admin deal or trying to do some publishing deal, or they're just trying to move forward with their business. So across the industry, it's just predatory contracts.
Got you. So my perspective was always like, just don't sign anything that you don't fully understand. And maybe that's simplifying it, and maybe that's, explain the other side to that. Why isn't it that easy? Why isn't it just, hey, if you don't understand something, because I feel like there's enough resources out there to get to the right answer, get to the right deal. What's the other side of that?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I feel like it's producers or artists just wanting to sign the deal for whatever reason, and they're really not listening. They don't really have any want or feeling to listen to you, no matter what perspective you're giving on the real side. So it's kind of just, people learn the hard way in the music business, which is like I think that's good and bad. Obviously bad because you don't want to see anyone get screwed over, but it probably takes you getting screwed over once or twice to make you wake up and realize the importance of reading every document thoroughly, hiring a attorney, hiring a management company, whatever it is, and to make sure your business is set up. So I think for me, it's just really having to convince artists or producers like, yo, I mean, I know you like this person or you think this is a good opportunity, but don't be desperate don't be desperate. I think it's their feeling of desperation that oftentimes people feel.
If you don't have any, if you're a producer and you're just producing in your bedroom, you don't have any contacts yet, and then you're offered a contract, is there like a suggestion of series of steps you should go through to kind of figure this out? What would you suggest to a producer that's just offered a contract for the first time?
Yeah, I would say producers are probably a unique party where, depending on how big their business is or what their aspirations are, they probably can skip the manager part. Probably. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a manager as a producer, but the person you will need is the attorney. And, I think that's usually the first time you should reach out to an entertainment attorney when, a contract that can affect the future of your music career is offered. So I think as soon as you get a contract offer, you go get an attorney. And, what happens is oftentimes the person who's submitting the contract is also referring an attorney, which, obviously it's it's a conflict of interest for sure. But oftentimes, people still go through with it. And, then a year and a half later, they're like, man, the whole situation was janky just because the person brought the contract and that person also provided the attorney. And then all of a sudden, you're not getting the best deal. So I think you look for your own attorney. There's a lot now, but still, I think there's still a gap between the amount of, obviously, attorneys and people offering and opening their business up and the amount of producers and artists and creators. So there's still a dearth and scarcity of, I think, the service providers who can really help. And especially, from a monetary standpoint, most people just don't have that money. Right. But I think you got to go before you sign that deal. I think you got to go get an attorney and fork up the cost for at least that, if you're interested in going that direction. But I'd say before then though, I think you should do your own personal research to see if like some of the deal points, right, like the term, how much money someone's getting, the percentage, the splits, the publishing. I think you can ascertain that yourself, and if that already is not good, like you probably shouldn't just don't even want to move forward with the deal. But if the deal points are solid for you, then I think maybe possibly engaging an attorney to help you negotiate that deal is probably best.
And it's difficult for a new producer to understand what the points are and understand and even know that point bumps exist. For example, for me, I didn't know what point bumps were. I didn't know how points operated. So my first agreement, I had an industry lawyer, and I should have done my research because he was friends with the lawyer representing the other side. And so he really didn't redline anything. And when I reviewed the contract, I wouldn't call it a predatory contract, but it was certainly a contract in the label's favor. And certainly my situation could have been a lot fairer, and I could have gotten some kind of royalty bump or, something higher advance, all of that. But the move that they did, and this is standard, and tell me if this is predatory. I feel like this has always been around because this was years ago. They put all that pressure on you and say, you got to sign this, otherwise your placement's not making the album. And I'm talking about, this was like the week that the album dropped. It was a total bluff. There's no way I wasn't on the album.
Right. No, I definitely see that. I see more so like you better like just sign it. Like just more pressure to sign it. I haven't heard that yet. Like, you're not going to be on an album if you don't sign it. Usually, I'll be honest, this is a nasty undertone of the business. But I feel like it's nasty. I'm usually getting contracts after the album's released.
Yeah, too.
Which is obviously disappointing. But that's sort of the nature of the business. But for producers out there, know that that's a little bit of a leverage point for you. The music's already released, and especially if the music's doing well, you can kind of say, I want a bigger advance, and because the music's already out, it's doing well, and you want me to get the record taken out? And it's like, No, I mean that you don't even want to start waving that around, but you got to understand there's power, and once the music's out, how much you can leverage when you haven't been paid.
And just so going back to finding a lawyer, obviously there's there's good lawyers, there's bad lawyers. Like, how would you as a new artist like ensure that you're finding a good one? I mean, obviously some common sense things, maybe ask some people that currently have lawyers, and is there a Yelp for entertainment attorneys? Like, where can we make sure we find a good attorney that has our back in the first go around?
Yeah, I would say, I think, Payne, you mentioned this earlier about like industry lawyers. It's difficult. It makes you, I think I'm a bit jaded in the sense that, I'm not with a big firm, so I don't really operate at that sort of industry. I want to be a part of some sort of bigger conglomerate over there. I'm sort of just fighting my own fight, so it allows me to just be a little bit more courageous in my efforts to advocate and do all that stuff. But with that being said, I think most people are looking at the industry lawyers, and they're just kind of picking and choosing from them via recommendation from artists, other producers, and things like that. So I think first thing would be just asking around any producer connection you have online, Twitter, use social media. It's 2019. You should be able to reach out to a handful of people and get an answer on who their attorney is, especially people who you respect from a business level. So I do that first. Just reach out to people that you have that are in arm's reach, or that you can contact, and to see who they're using. And then secondly, I think you should be looking at their bandwidth. Like, how are they contacting you? Can you get a hold of them? It doesn't matter what their name of them. It's like, I don't get that. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, yo, I have this attorney. And I'm like, great. No disrespect to them, but it's like you can't even get a hold of them because the amount of money you're paying is not even, you're not going to get their attention. So it's I think people need to focus when they're getting their attorney. There's a multitude of factors, but I think the most important is bandwidth. Like, can they actually do this in a reasonable amount of time and give you the sort of respect you deserve, and without charging you through the roof?
Yeah, no, that's crucial. The lawyer that I've been working with for years, we've developed a really strong relationship. But I think early days it was word of mouth, and then I met her in person and made sure we had like a cool vibe too. And every time I reach out to her, she's very responsive. She definitely doesn't take her more than a day to get back to me, and that was crucial for me because a lot of times things happen very quickly, things move very fast, and I need a response. Right. What's your, so I personally have a problem with just the word predatory, because I'm always, and I say this probably every episode, like I'm always fighting the fight to kind of reverse this cloud of skepticism that hovers over the industry. Not to say that it shouldn't exist or bad things don't exist, but I feel like there's bad things that happen and bad people in every industry.
Correct.
But in our industry, it's like we use words like, predatory and thing. And it kind of makes me cringe when these words come out because it's really not that serious.
Right. I mean, or different. I agree in terms of just business itself. Like, the person with the most leverage is usually sending out contracts in their favor. So, I think, when I use the word predatory, though, it's like the other factors, right? I think that does kind of make it a little different. I've done other stuff like, I was at Bloomberg doing corporate law, and I also have a, fintech background. So it's kind of like, I've seen that space, but, I think the social and societal pressure and that sort of thing. And then there's like a lack of, just be honest, there's a lack of sophistication and education oftentimes with the producer community and artists in general. So it's like, there's a lot of factors that make me say predatory outside of the actual contract. Cause like the contract itself, I do deals all the time, and I'm always like, yo, when this deal comes in, do not take it personal. Like, it is paperwork. They're going to send out a contract that's advantageous to them, and that's fine. It's our job to negotiate. Do not take that personal. So, I think that's sort of addressing that, like, sort of predatory, but it's just like the other factors when I'm like finding out like some A&Rs like hitting them up saying like, yo, this deal's done if you don't sign tomorrow, or like, I think that's the sort of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't even know what to say. It's really clouding up the process. But I love that sentiment that you just gave. I truly do, just because I'm also on the internet a lot, and I'm just hearing it's always like, yo, this music business, the industry is, it's conniving, and it's funny because it's like, bro, it's not that it's not that. It's not set up for you to fail.
Right.
But I do think, when you don't have education, and you're easily susceptible to, forceful behavior, I think, it can be super predatory.
Can you also speak on the satanic rituals that you've witnessed?
But
oh, we can't talk about that. They're listening.
Yeah. Payne loves putting the Illuminati in every episode, so it had to rear its head. But what you just spoke to is, you said the lack of education and sophistication, I think is the word you use.
Right.
Like, that's on us though. Like that's not like, built into the industry. That's on aspiring music entrepreneurs to get educated and to be more sophisticated.
Facts.
So that's why, I'm always trying to push back, because, I think the consequence of this perception of the music industry, from what I've seen, is that we have a lot of up and coming artists now that are moving in such a skeptical way that they refuse to do anything.
Right.
And then they don't grow at all because they think everybody's trying to take advantage of them. And that's
I couldn't agree more. I see that's such a big fact. And but I think if you go to any sort of transaction skeptical or like very adversarial, it's never going to work out. I mean, like you there's going to be a level of trust you give up in any sort of relationship, in business and in life. So it's kind of, you just hit it on a nail. You see people and they're just like, no, they're the enemy. It's like, bro, even if you did sign this deal, you're gonna have to work with them after this. And you don't want to have that undertone.
Right. Go. Pay any more on the predatory contracts, or should we jump into some other stuff? And you're muted.
Let me move off into a different direction. That's related to this. Because you have a colleague named Adam Friedman, who's also an entertainment attorney and who represents producers. He recently posted a viral tweet, and I'll read it. It says, if you release a song produced by my client before confirming terms, we're charging you the full rate. If you still don't pay, we're claiming 100% of your song, I assume, on the master and the publishing side. If you still refuse to pay, we're filing a takedown and going the copyright infringement route. Producer Grind picked this up, asked people if this should be the approach that producers and their attorneys take from now on. A lot of people said yes. A couple of people, including Sunny Digital, actually said no. And that spawned a lot of conversation about a whole lot of topics related to producers and business and bridge burning and bridge building. And I want to tell you, this is a big topic. What were your thoughts when your colleague posted that tweet at the beginning, as another attorney?
Yeah, no, I mean, I know Adam obviously very well, and I thought it was interesting. I think the first 2 points are spot on, right? It's like, I'm a big proponent of, you better like at least send splits before you release the song, especially with like a bigger name, a producer who has played. It's just like that's like a lack of care, effort, diligence for $1 billion company not to do, right? It's just like, come on. In any other industry, you're not getting away with that. So, for me, I think that's unacceptable, and there needs to be some sort of tax or charge for that. You just shouldn't be able to do that and release music. So there has to be some consequences for their actions. And for the most part, there just hasn't been any consequences. That's why it continues to get done. So there's no real need or effort to pay people. And you hear producers, and I'll talk to clients sometimes, and they're like, no, Karl, I don't want you to push back too hard. I don't want you, because I don't want to burn any bridges. I'm like, bridges? Like, dude, you're not getting paid for your music. It's like, what? Why do you want to work with some of these people anyway? Or if this is you got to stand up for what you're owed. And, things don't change without sort of standing up. So I liked it. I'm not the type, I probably wouldn't claim the record. And, I think that's just, it's a lot. It's putting a gun to the situation, and it just gets messy. I don't. Maybe I would. I guess if all hell, it was a big record, and it was the last resort. I guess maybe I would. And same with filing a takedown and going to copy. I probably am not going to do that as well, unless it really, really, really gets to that point. But I do not blame him for having that approach, and I don't dislike the tweet or the sentiment, because I think if anything's going to change, there has to be some consequences for labels doing this.
I mean, I definitely know some producers that have gone the takedown route and actually ended up settling. It wasn't the most favorable situation, but that's just because labels have more resources in them. But I think you're right. As a last resort, my concern is that there's this whole conversation about burning bridges, which leads to the term blackballing. And as the conversation unfolded, a lot of producers expressed their fear. And these are new up and coming producers. We still didn't hear any more follow up from Sunny Digital, which would be something I'd like to know. But so he could give some additional information about his comment. But this idea, and you touched on it, yeah, you're burning a bridge potentially by standing up for yourself, but these are people who aren't paying you for your beat and aren't respecting you enough to send you paperwork and splits and handle the business. So why would you be nice to them in hopes of getting more opportunities for them not to pay you and not to respect you, right?
Right.
So there's
and it's
that.
Also just
My bad. Go ahead.
And it's also just like, I don't even know why you think it's that personal. Oftentimes, it's like you think if you stand up to this artist over here about not getting paid, like no other artist is going to work with you, or not going to get into sessions anymore, or you're not. I don't think that's true at all. So it's like I think it's the fear mongering I talk about a lot in the music business. It's just there's just fear of it's like it's not that. Some of the most outspoken people are also successful and do very, 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 very well for themselves and get in sessions and do good work. So if as long as you're in the right is right, wrong is wrong. I don't think you can. That's just a basic life principle that it should be applied in this scenario. Right is right, wrong is wrong. So if someone's doing you wrong and you stand up for yourself, it's like, come on.
I mean, was that ever the case in the music business? Because there really is this fear, especially among producers, of being blackballed from the industry for standing up for yourself, and that's why a lot of them are even afraid to get legal representation when dealing with contracts. A lot of them are afraid to ask for money. A lot of them are afraid to ask about publishing, just because once that conversation comes up and they start asserting themselves, they feel like they're somehow stepping outside of their, or they're crossing a line. They're violating a boundary or something, because it feels like a personal exchange to them, especially if they're working with an artist directly.
Correct.
So what have you seen examples of producers getting blackballed? What kind of advice do you give to producers who have that fear?
No, I've yet to see that, really, unless like they were sending out bad, or like lying about not samples, or like people get mad about stuff like that. But in general, no, I haven't seen that for someone standing up for themselves if they were right. I don't think it should be a conversation. I truly, like, I'm almost fed up with the being blackball conversations. It's like, all right, well, you're just going to continue to not sort of even the playing field, because you're not helping the cause at all. And you just gotta stand up for what you believe in, and the world usually respects that. And I think that's something that's lost. Like, people usually respect someone who isn't going to just fold or accept themselves to bad business. So I haven't seen anyone get blackballed. I haven't seen anyone get in trouble for hiring an attorney to look over their producer agreements. I have seen some attorneys mess things up for their clients by maybe going too hard, or not understanding the situation, not knowing enough, and just ruining it on that end. But with that being said, I just think people have to understand it's an education thing, Dame. Like you said, it's truly education. It's like, all right, here's how much a producer is supposed to be getting. Here's how much points that's standard in the industry, and here's a sort of a producer fee. And if your attorney's saying otherwise or the other party's saying otherwise, and you're right, it's like I think you just got to kind of stand on what the truth is.
And that's the beautiful thing about having an attorney. Yeah, as a producer, if I'm working with an artist directly, we're making the music, all of a sudden the artist says, I want this on my album. Yeah, I don't need to tell the artist what percentage I want. I don't need to tell the artist what advance I want. I just say, my attorney's going to handle it with your label.
Right.
Otherwise, things get messy because it feels like it's a friendship. And it might be a friendship. Well, it could be. You could have a friendship with the artist. You could have a chemistry with the artist. But you and the artist are there to make music. The artist doesn't need to represent the label unless they own the label or are part owner in the label. Otherwise, you just need to keep making the music and say, look, whatever happens between a conversation with your attorneys and my attorneys, that's all business.
Right.
And I'm not going to be the bad guy. I'm not going to say, I might tell my lawyer, no, I don't want to accept these terms, go back and ask for A, B, and C. But that has nothing to do with me and the artists I'm working with. So but with artists, a lot of this stuff is independent, and especially a lot of the artists that are listening to this podcast. So there is very direct conversations between the artists and producers, and they're having them. I think very few people that are listening to this podcast are represented by a label, I would assume. So they have to be prepared for these conversations. They should feel comfortable. They should feel comfortable having them. I think artists and labels, if they're involved, like they need to do better about taking care of producers and communicating. Is there anything on the producer end that you feel like that they haven't been doing that they need to do better? Is it better communication? It sounds like from Payne, like maybe they're hesitant to be as assertive as they should be because of potential ramifications. But what can we advise to the producers as well as, talk to artists and labels about making sure this shit gets taken care of?
Yeah, I think everyone has to take their L's in the game early on, especially. So it's like, I get like you don't want to, I'm just getting started out. I don't want to like fight too much about this, or it's my first big placement, so whatever they give me is fine. I understand that sentiment. It's almost like the internship argument, where like you start from the bottom and rise up, and you take your lumps. But I will say, you argue these are $1 million companies, and you almost have to take a strategic and full totality of circumstance sort of approach, in the sense that you're dealing with maybe an artist who just signed a $2.5 million record deal, and he's signed to a $1 billion billion-dollar entity, and they're trying to offer you $1,000 for an album cut. It's kind of like, is that really fair though? When they have a recording budget that's rather large, and should you just be able to say, I'm going to just take this for whatever reason? Or you get a publishing contract backed in, somehow you don't have 50%. You see 3 other names in here. One's an executive producer, and it's like, that should be coming out on his side or your side. Like, not, why is that coming out of the producer's publishing side? He didn't do anything to this beat. Like, I don't even know who that guy is.
So going back to, I think that'd be a good thing to explore. So if an artist is offering you $1,000, they're signed to a label, somehow how big their budget is, like how do you value what that song is worth? Like, it's not, I wouldn't value it based off the value of the $1 billion company, right? Because that really has nothing to do with it, right? It's this individual project, and what is the value of my contribution to it, not the $1 billion company.
But I think we have a sort of a standard almost on the record label side, when like, it's album time and you made a cut. I mean, like $1,000 is just if that's like the full. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's even remotely close to what the producer contributions is. Even if it does,
But let's just get on the same page in terms of the example, because obviously it's going to be a different conversation if you're working on a Jay-Z album versus if you're working on an album of somebody that's like their debut and they, don't really have the traction. It's not going to come out like, going platinum in the first week. Should there be a difference in that conversation? I'm assuming.
Yeah, there definitely is, and I think that's when I talk about totality of circumstance. Almost, you have to make educated decisions. It's like, well, this person's super hot right now. It's like Little TJ or somebody like that. It's like, this guy, everything he's putting up, even album cuts are just streaming super well. Why are you giving me $1,000 for this? Like this is a proven track record. But you see somebody else, like you just said, where you're looking at where he's at from an artistic standpoint. You're more willing to understand and take that bullet and say, it's one, you could probably assume his recording budget smaller. Two, he doesn't have any success. He doesn't have a high level of success in terms of streaming and other stuff. And then, I think that's where you say, yeah, I get it. Like, I'll take that $1,000. But that's why I say, like, totality of circumstances. A lot of times it isn't, though, that guy at the bottom. It's somebody who has a successful track record of streaming well and doing a lot of other stuff. And, like, we know these are advances, right? These are just advances on payments. So, he's done well. This beat's a super hard beat. I'm getting 50% of the pub. I got my 3 points, which I still think is super low. Give me what I deserve. It's doing well. And then, I just think 1,000's on the small side, and that kind of needs to go too. But you can use your deference, and I think you brought some great points to the table. You need to have just an understanding of where an artist is, and that stuff.
So.
Yeah.
Cool. Payne, I'm not sure where we're at with the timing. There was one other tweet that I think you made recently that I wanted to talk about really quick, but if we're short on time, we can have the topic next week.
No, that we can do it. I'm down for that.
So there was a tweet, I believe it said, you can tell when an artist is trying to get signed versus trying to build a real infrastructure and take it the distance. Can we talk about some of those signs of when we know an artist is just trying to get signed versus trying to really build that foundation for long-term success, whether it be independent or they eventually partner with an entity?
Correct. Yeah, I feel like in hip-hop especially with a lot of drill music, I'm in Philly. There's a sound called Philly Drill coming out, and it's just like these kids are racking it up on YouTube. Like, their YouTube numbers are just insane. And I'm just like, cool. But when you're not sort of trying to build out a fan base across all platforms, it seems like you're trying to direct all attention for perception to this one platform or channel, which happens to be YouTube. And you don't really care about the other numbers because you feel like a label might look at that and say, but he's not translating over here. We're going to give him less money. And like, I'm not even knocking that hustle. If that's like what you want to do and you don't think you're the type of artist who can build that infrastructure, that's fine. But I'm just noticing that sort of trend in hip hop where a lot of kids are only dropping on whether it be a SoundCloud or YouTube or something like that. And for me, I think that's the first sign of me thinking that someone's kind of just doing this to get a big deal, which once again, I don't really have any issue with that. That's just different strategy than in the business. And
it's also super risky because we know that we don't own these platforms and we don't own the communication with our fans. So if you build up this audience on one platform and they decide to make a change in the algorithm or like something happens to that platform, it gets hacked or whatever, then what?
So it's like, I think for me, and I just challenge people, like, why are we, I think too many people build for the label or build for that sort of acknowledgement from whatever party, as opposed to trying to build that real infrastructure. I want real fans. I want to be able to go out on tour. I want to be able to cultivate and connect with the community and build a community. That's how almost every artist should be thinking. And, if you end up signing a deal, cool, like that, labels aren't enemies, but you should be trying to build an infrastructure to sort of take it the distance if you can. Like, I think everybody wants to own as much of their stuff possible or make as much money.
Yeah, I really don't think there should be a difference in your approach, whether you eventually want to get signed
Right.
or if you want to be independent. Because even if you get signed, it's still going to require like an infrastructure and and like a foundation for being successful within that entity or partnering with an entity. So it should never be kind of like looking for a quick scheme or a quick come up to, to get signed and then have somebody else, just do everything else for you.
Yeah, that's the disconnect right there. You just made the point for me. I just feel like even when people get signed, when they do that, and you get signed by a label, and you don't realize how much work you still have to do. It's like still on you. People don't realize that still on you.
Right. No, we saw there was an article, I think we posted it earlier in the year, that talked about like how many acts are being signed by labels, like on a daily basis. So if you're thinking that you're going to get the red carpet handheld treatment once you get signed to these labels, when the label is signing, 2 other people like you every day, you're sadly mistaken.
Right. There it is.
Dope. Well, man, I definitely appreciate you being here. Very nice to meet you. Hopefully, you come back in another episode, man. Obviously knowledgeable.
Love what you guys do. Keep it up, man. I love what you guys do.
Payne, you want to take us out?
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job. I was like, man, am I going to do my outro? Once again, appreciate you, Karl Fowlkes. How do people follow you on social media? Yeah,
I'm ESQFOWLKES on all platforms. It's a pretty simple thing. Connect with me, and I try to drop gems and give a honest and real perspective on all my platforms.
Last question, if people want to work with you, like, do you have too much on your plate right now? Should people reach out to you if they have, issues with their contracts?
No, I don't think you ever can with the certain right people. It just, I think I definitely look for a certain client, someone who's diligent, someone who really brings their part to the table, because I'll go extra hard for you from a creative standpoint as well as the legal standpoint. It just, I don't just want a bag. I want to work with artists and producers that I like and that do quality work. And so, like, if you do that stuff, I'm always open.
Yeah.
All right, we will catch you on episode 22. Shout out Audio Mac for not only the platform, but for starting this conversation. Shout out to all our listeners on Audio Mac, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Music, and wherever the hell else this podcast exists. I'm not even sure myself.